Yeah,
how do you weave this intersection
yeah,
between gender, class, caste?
yeah. So sexuality is dictated by the economical politics that happens around, and the most vulnerable people who are, vulnerable to sexual, rigidities are queer people and women mostly. Yeah, so it was important for me to show that queerness set in a particular class and subtly bring out the politics of caste and race and color, within that. So we re-understand that queerness takes the shape of the culture around it, So in India, this is the problem. These are the issues that a queer person faces within this economical sector.
Yeah, because I think that what was very, very beautiful as an experience also is to see that somewhere there's a tussle between, you know, characters in the film trying to move towards individual freedom, certain the choices that they made, the decisions that they took, not only always related to sexuality, but also in life choices, like what is my career going to be, what am I going to work towards, and at the same time figuring out how to work and operate with things that are, quite systemic, like family structure and marriage and these things. So what was that writing experience like for you when you're writing about, this interplay between managing this societal pressures and at the same time seeking for this freedom?
Both the characters are actually, though they fall in love and try to sustain their relationship, actually they're trying to find their freedom as two individuals, and that's how the story goes, And yeah, so I think freedom is the main thing that I have focused on in the film, about how what freedom means to both these people. What it means to one character does not mean the same to the other character. Yeah. So yeah, anything more? Like, can you explain the question again?
No, I mean, it's very interesting that there is individual choice and freedom on the one hand, and then at the other hand, there's also this thing of you have to stay within a certain community. So, how does, or break out of it? So, or also in finding that freedom, there is a collective resilience of sorts. So, how does these two things operate for you? Like, how do you think about individual freedom versus or alongside collective resilience, even around sexuality,
Yeah,
let's say?
individual freedom and collective freedom are both interdependent. For definitely, they complement each other. So, but I think individual freedom is the first and foremost to be able to collectively understand and participate in the process of freedom. And like Ambedkar said, there is no other chain. If a person is not more in a jail, if he's not, like, if his mind is jailed, then there is no other freedom, no matter how much he studies or how much he protests. So I think individual freedom, and we need to re-understand what is success, what is the idea of success this society is entrusting, and if we are free from that, I think that is the first freedom. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that comes out also very clearly in the film.
in the film.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so the next question is kind of again about the synopsis of your film, which I thought was very unique because usually people go on to describe the plot. But in the way you describe the synopsis, it's almost as if it's an experiment to work with women technicians, trying to understand how this whole setting, the new trend of all women crew, actors, editor, all of this happens in your film. And so the question is that what was your film experience kind of filming this whole process with a woman crew? Because you might have also had experiences of working with other kinds of
Correct.
crews. Yeah. And how is it different from other kind of contexts? Yeah.
So this film, Nano Ladies, is a love story between two women, and there were very, very sensitive visuals that had to be taken. And I had worked with men technicians before I chose the women technicians, and they were like really skilled and great technicians. But there was something not working out. They were not able to understand the sensitivity. The gaze was very male, and when there was a dialogue with men to change the way they are looking at this whole thing, there would be frictions, So that's when I decided to bring in women technicians, and even women technicians, gaze can become male, So, but it is more easier to be able to come to the same wavelength, yeah. So that way, choosing this crew and doing the production through with them for 8 months, brought us all close. So yeah, yeah. So and yeah, so mostly I like to work with women technicians, and I think my subjects are I can collaborate with women better with the subjects that I make, and more women have to come into this field, definitely.
I mean, I do think that it is setting a trend in some sense, because I think in documentary films we do have, there have been these discussions, at least in us, like between us as friends also, it would be so different if a woman was behind the camera, and how would this look vis-a-vis. So in that sense, I feel like not just in film, but even in other places where women are often not given the opportunity to, let's say, edit, or to think of just technology, any kind of technology is usually male. So I think it's a really, I feel it really sets a very good example in that sense,
Thank you.
your film. Uh, so yeah, so this is a slightly kind of a curious question in terms of, like, when I was reading your blog, I also was struck that you were quite inspired by this book, Selfish Gene.
Yes.
And I mean, could you just elaborate on how his theories influence your practice, and what did you read or find in that book that kind of inspires your work, or what are the...
I think the best thing I loved about that book was coming from an art background, to be able to look at an emotion in the most scientific and neutral way, the selfish gene, And Richard Dawkins tries and explains why that selfishness comes to every gene, every mammal, every animal, And it's a very, very vast book. I'm rereading again and again, but to be able to understand how the whole the idea of I, comes through biologically, why I should survive, So I think those I actually, when I wrote the first draft of this film, there were animations in between, scientific animations, okay, but then we cut it out because the film was going too long. Okay. Yeah. So for these animations, I had read Richard Dawkins, but I'm going to be bringing those ideas into my next work anyways. I couldn't bring completely into this, but I had a large influence about looking at the idea of selfish and I again, So in basically, Richard Dawkins writes about the selfish gene, about why every species wants to reproduce, and why it wants to survive, and trying to give it a lot of explanation. So one of the character in the film actually is driven towards those ideas, you know. Spoiler alert, sorry. I
Yeah.
just realized before I ended the sentence.
Yeah, but like within the selfishness also, how does one fight this selfishness, or is it even about fighting the selfishness? What is the aspiration then?
So that's exactly what we need to re-understand, what is selfish. If we are giving it emotional and philosophical ideologies, politics, then there is a wrong and right to it. If we are understanding it in a very neutral way, rather we need to understand how rather than why, because why makes us painful, it gives us anger, it gives us so many, but how brings us if we understand how something happens, I think, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so so it's not as if you're saying that there is a selfishness that is there innately in all of us,
Yes.
and at the same time one aspires to find how these things could be shared. It's not like you will ever become selfless, but at the
Yeah.
same time, how do we nurture these
The
processes of
collective.
interdependence?
Yes, interdependence. Yes.
Okay, cool. uh, I think everyone's going to see that for sure in the approach to your film, even the style in which you made it.
Yes.
So, do you want to say a little bit about your
Yes.
style and treatment?
Yes. So the film is actually about it's largely about how to bring in a non-binary lifestyle, and how to re-understand gender. So yeah, there is the if we see the trailer, it is for sure about this one girl, Anita, who's masculine and trying to prove that she is feminine. Yeah, she's a woman, and so I think. Can you repeat the question again? Yeah, so that character is a very, she does not have the glamour ideas of industry where she is favoring products, makeup products and stuff like that. So she's a very non-glamorous person who is attempting to become an actor, and the film industry is not accepting her. So this she is so non-glamorous, and I wanted to bring that kind of non-glamorous style to the film also, where if there is a shake, there is a shake. You don't glamorize with lens or whatever is available, and then you make it manual and present it, just like the characters, how they look and how they behave and how the story is. So because life is not scripted, no. So I tried to bring in those elements through the style and narrative of the film. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to show the trailer for just as a small little connected to what Shailaja was saying. It's a really beautiful trailer. So might as well just take a small break.
Yeah.
Okay, it's trying to build up the excitement for the film as it will slowly arrive in the theaters. I hope that everyone does actually watch this film. Actually, just when I was watching the trailer, this I haven't planned this question, but in the work that we do at Mara, also like most of the groups we've been talking to, especially women-led organizations in the country, the first thing that they're saying right now in terms of violence is mostly around love failures and love, like failures in love, and how that automatically sometimes results in suicides or deaths, because the parents, it's a love jihad and all of these things are happening. So at such a time, to make this kind of story on, it's a love story, but it's also a daring love story. So what is your opinion on like just to make a film about love, particularly in this time, in this political climate, which is trying to almost say, we will tell you how to love, we will tell you who to love, and we'll also show you how to love. So what are your thoughts and views about this idea of love in India at this point in time?
Love in India or anywhere in the world is, I think, an extended form of friendship. There is no friendship, there is no love. And all lovers are first friends, and that's why they're lovers. And I think that friendship is dictated by the society and the culture that it is amid. And right now, with the kind of political tension that we are facing, I think love is not enough. Yeah. And that is what film is also about. Love is not enough. And life is larger than love. So that is what Nano Lady is all about. So, yeah. And queerness is not about just two individuals together, it is also about one individual by themselves. So that is also what queerness is about. So, yeah, and the film largely shows how friendship and love is strained amid a political scenario such as what is existing right now. Yeah.
And also how one resists that.
Yes.
Yeah. And also, like when I was watching the trailer, one more thing that just made me think was also how you worked with voice, music, clothing, uh, and they could be very subtle things, like these sensuous aspects that are not very literally like, but it's very consciously done and very sensitively done. So would you like to share a little bit about how that process was for you to put all these different things together and imagine that this can work with that, and there's a lot of fantastic permutation combinations. Even the choice of music is very interesting, or the aesthetics that you've chosen, even for the, it's quite different from other things that we've seen before. So
Yeah, so I worked in a bit in every department, art, music, and writing to acting. To every department I worked, and yeah, so bringing all these art forms together was a challenge, and I was always interested in all forms of art. Yeah, and yeah, costumes. There is, you can see an evolution in costumes. The story is a past and present of two people, and you can see how the costumes evolve with their ideologies and culture. Their inner culture changes, evolves through that. So this was very interesting and also easy because it is myself. I wrote about. So it was pretty easy, and it was uh, the most difficult part was to on look at myself as another person and write. And there was so many things I understood about myself, not just about the society. So yeah, it was quite something. It is my first feature film, and it is a great experience on the whole to bring all these together. And it was a manual process. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that in many ways I did read the film as autobiographical in some sense, even though I don't know you personally. It felt like this is a person telling us a story about herself and some definitely lived experience. So, like, how do you feel that autobiographical narratives can actually challenge, like, existing mindsets and intergenerational clashes?
Mm.
Like, these lived experiences that which you are showing out in the film, which are based on some of your lived experiences and also your aspirations and how things should change. Do you feel that autobiographical narratives can actually challenge existing stereotypes, can shift some mindsets, or could I don't know, make could address some of these intergenerational clashes that we also see in the film?
Yes, I think when an audience is perceiving, and once they already know it's a first-hand experience of somebody, the way they look at it is completely different. And the way the filmmaker has presented themselves through that film also becomes a statement. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
So it's a conscious choice of also keeping it autobiographic. Like, would you like, because in writing we have read like several autobiographies, right? Like Dalit autobiographies, which actually make you understand that this experience is not your experience. In that sense, it makes it very clear. So in that sense, I was just trying to understand the impact of autobiographical narratives.
Yes, autobiographical narrative, any sort of a narrative will have impact when it has the authenticity of experience that maker is talking about. And also, very simply putting it, it is more easy to find stories from your own life. And I think that's how most of us work, no, as artists. So.
I mean, I think for me that experience definitely happened in theater, because that's how we learn theater. Like, always, before you tell someone else's story, first you tell your
Your
story,
story, yes,
right? And
yes.
it is the toughest thing, and sometimes it is difficult to formulate that narrative. But I think that's, over time we realized that that was one way of storytelling that is probably the most relatable even to yourself.
Yes.
So in that light, like especially in the film, because there's this deep struggle, I think also tension between like a theater practitioner and or art student, various different arts practitioners struggling on the one hand or working their way through, and at the same time there's a tension of also engaging in this commercial scene, right? Like going to the market, finding yourself in this market logic of things. What does it mean? Will I lose that touch? So how do you kind of decide, or how do you explain, or how do you deal with this dilemma between making these irrational choices and taking practical decisions? Because when you take practical usually when people say, okay, now you've done enough theater, please now just make some money. How do you, this idea of responsibility, as you were saying earlier also about success, so you sometimes you reach that point when, okay, I now need to do certain things for not just survival, but you make certain practical decisions. And then these irrational choices are always kind of wanting to pull you back. And I somehow read the film as a very, it somehow sits between this tension of making these irrational choices, like the rebellion and the desire to make these irrational choices, and also take some practical decisions, which can also be connected to yourself. So, how do you make those decisions, or how do you make those choices, or how does it play out in real life?
Okay. In real life, yes, it is quite a difficult thing. Um, but I think I have always been that kind of person who's best at doing what I would like to do than what the system is asking me to do. And somehow, luckily, I've tried to sustain that nature. And uh, yeah, so could you repeat the question again in one
Yeah,
line?
the thing is, then how do you, if you are someone who believes in the work that you want to do,
Mm,
and it practically
mm,
in life where everything is about success, money, you
mm,
need to make it
mm.
commercial, how do you resist those choices and continue to do the things that you believe in?
Okay, so in every field we are actually working for or against a market, and that market is capital in every field. I think, yeah, it is it is quite a difficult thing to make choices for survival and these things, but it is very important for us to understand what success is, and re-understand what success is. So uh, like the most of the system that we are around is corporatized, and it is capital market, the approach and everything, so I think uh, it is important for us to bring in a community approach towards all sorts of arts and work. And we would need a cultural shift for that to happen. And it will take us quite some time for that cultural shift to happen. And yeah, so for me, it is still an ongoing process, actually. But somehow I largely tend to doing what I like. And so my idea of success is not heteronormative. So once we step out of the heteronormative system, I think we will clearly see what we want as individuals. And yeah, so in the film and me both work towards against a capital market, and towards a new work culture, yeah.
Yeah, and in that sense, then how would, like, there's also a choice that, one is trying to also make a film that's not so niche that only some people see it, but also the effort to put it out there and make sure that it's seen by wider audiences. So, how do you think your film will be received, let's say, by audiences in Bangalore, in Karnataka?
So I'm trying to get the film in theaters. So I hope it reaches the middle class and common audience, like, And I'm trying to also get satellite rights, so it goes to TV, and people like my mom, my neighbors, they watch the film. And that apart, I think the best is when it hits the OTT. It is more available to more people. And yeah, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, exactly. Like, so the question was just that how do you think the film will work for a Kannada audience, especially in Bangalore and Karnataka?
So in Karnataka, Bangalore, right now, as we know, it might not work, or like how Darshan film, or these big star films work, and that was not my intent also. And I don't think I make artwork for now, just now itself. It has a long period, and it's supposed to be made and kept, and it'll open up itself through the time. So it's not just for right now. Yeah,
So, in that sense, your reading of the mainstream is quite different.
definitely.
So, how do you define mainstream then?
Mainstream is a quite a challenge. Um,
Would you
and
see your work in, like how? That's why I said, what is mainstream for you? Like, is it like,
So mainstream is actually about box office. Rationally speaking, it's about box office. Um, so the market, the whole market, I am right now trying to understand how to bring in sensitive subjects and subjects such as these, which are less spoken about through mainstream narrative and mainstream cinema, so that it can hit theaters and it can hit the, it can reach the common man and the most audience. So I think the film market is largely changing from the theaters to digital, and I think that is the it's a fantastic shift, and cinema will be more available for independent filmmakers and newcomers, you know, and the branding of theater will break soon, and it will be much more an organic process film, and the digital world will take it a lot ahead, I think. Yeah.
Wow, that sets out a fantastic utopia for all of us who have many ideas of how we're going to put our work out. Because that's where the biggest struggle is, I think, also for artists. They don't want to compromise on form, on style, on doing some things a particular way, but there's not an audience for it. So if you go the audience route, then there's you have to make some compromises on form. And I think that in your film, you also it's a very sharp critique, I think, also for arts institutions and like government run arts institutions and art schools and the kind of pedagogy that goes on in there. And so I think that it would be really valuable for, I guess, artists who are studying right now to also just, if you could share some of your recommendations based on your experience as an art student, which is there in the film, but it's also your own experience as a art student yourself. So what kind of recommendations would you make for arts institutions to shift, the way and approach of teaching the arts? Or yeah.
Yeah, I think each art school has a different approach in this country, actually, based on the state and the culture it is set in. And but I would say one thing: not just art, the whole education system has to simply change. But people who are studying in that, you know, every artist, I would say one thing, that let's face it, that we all come into art field to become artists, but most of us end up as teachers, because that's the only job in any art field, filmmaking or anywhere. Okay, so be better teachers than the teachers that you've had. That's all. That's how education system can change.
Uh, would you like to share some of your challenges as an art student while you were studying art or even film, because you went on to study film
Yes.
in
In
Chennai?
fact,
So,
film, I would say it was much more challenging. When I was studying visual art, it was new, and it was fantastic. There was one fantastic teacher called Anil Kumar sir, who brought in beautiful idea of art history and to understand the importance of it in every field, in every department. So after that, when I went to the college film school, mm, I was actually amid a amid a crowd who were just entering arts. They were coming from engineering. They were coming from very different fields, you know, and they were just coming to this field, trying to break away from corporatization. So there were art history classes again in this, and I saw that the approach was completely glamorized, you know, and there was a lot of industry understanding of how to make a film and become successful and push yourself and run the rat race, you know. So I had to unlearn all that once I left film school and went into working in the news, because there is no scripting in news. You need to shoot what is available, and that narrative is rather more real and was more challenging as a filmmaker. So I tried to bring in these kind of narratives into stylized filmmaking. Yeah.
no, and also like you have worked in media also, right? Like in media, journalism, like so those challenges and experiences, especially when you can't actually say what's happening. How does one grapple with that?
When you don't know what's happening.
Like, for example, if you're reporting something
Uh,
as a journalist, or if you're trying to show something that's happening, and there's a lot of this censorship that comes in your work, whether it may be very systemic and it's sometimes also directly like you can't show this. So, how did you ever experience any of these
that's
kinds of
why I
things?
left corporate. Yeah. So that's when I was working in a where I first started my work as a cameraman in the press, and I worked with a fantastic person called K. Balakailasam sir, son of K. Balachandar sir, and under his mentorship I learned a lot about life and everything. So when I left that space and joined other news channels, the scenario was not the same. It was a very different scenario. So that's when I understood that, like, once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. So there is no sticking to it and adjust. So you leave or just completely become. So I left that field after.
Good choice, I think. Yeah, I mean, because in we were quite lucky to get a sense of watching the uncensored cut. But like in Cinema Paradiso, there's this beautiful sequence where everyone's come to watch the film and everyone is suddenly seeing all the uncensored clips from all the films that have been cut. And I was just thinking, like as artists also, like what would we do with all these uncensored cuts if we were to approach it creatively? Have you ever thought about
That's a
that?
nice idea. Make a film uncensored, uncensored India.
Yeah, but do you think that the censorship, the censor board certificate or the censored cut would change the experience from what one would have?
Yes, of
How?
course. Because I am trying to say what is censored, and they censor that. It changes everything, So, um, see, very simply speaking, there is a love-making scene between two women, and when we say that two men or women love, the first thing that hits our mind is how are these two people going to make love? So that is what I addressed in how to people from India, from Indian cultural values, try to break that and make love. So that has been censored, and it does change a lot of narrative. Yeah.
So, like, how do we fight the censorship? Like, in the sense, like, do we just start talking about everything that's uncensored so it just goes live? Or, like, do we just find other ways to creatively speak about that which is censored? Because it has to come out, as you were saying. The censor parts would probably be the most important parts of your expression, cinematically and as part of the story. So, how do we creatively imagine these censorships or the
How do
censored
we
content?
manage? How
Yeah.
do we?
Imagine the censored content. Let's say there are
Uh,
these cuts
uh,
and they're like,
uh,
you can't use this.
uh,
What do we do with this?
okay. Uh, I don't know. Like, I mean, see, I think. Could you repeat your question? I didn't understand.
No, like I'm saying, like from your film, the lovemaking scene is cut. Something else will be cut. I mean, I was already imagining what all are going to be cut,
Mm,
and it really made me feel that okay, if that's
mm,
cut,
okay, okay.
how would someone who is not seeing this and like it's a very different experience. So, what do we do with that which is censored?
Okay. So we could have private screenings with the censor.
Yeah, okay. So we have to organize many private screenings of your film. I won't. I have two more questions, and then we'll open it up for the audience. But one of the things that I found very interesting is how you really play between the masculine and feminine, even through the film, and even in exactly also through costumes and stuff like that. So my question is like, can you tell us like how the masculine and feminine play out in your artistic practice? Like, is it about striking a balance between masculine and feminine, or is it showing the vulnerabilities of both positions? Because there is a continuum. It's not like,
So this is about a female who's very free, and we always think a female who's very free is masculine. So I think, yeah, it is just about showing how an individual who happens to be a female can be free and still be a woman, by her terms. Yeah.
and how would you define then masculine and feminine in your artistic practice? Is there like a distinct difference, or you think it's all merged?
More than artistic practice, I think there is a strong masculine side and feminine side to all of us, and I also have that. So I am a biological woman, and I'm very proud of it. And I I wouldn't call myself a man, but there is a lot of free side to me, and that people or that is usually perceived to be masculine. And I am a combination of both this, and so are all of us. Yeah, I think. Yeah, yeah.
This is the best time to play the song. So we're going to play the only things that are released, the only things we can show, unfortunately. So we're going to watch the song that Shailaja released on May 1st, actually, for the International Workers' Day, which was also an amazing time to release the song, uh, which we also shared. So now we're going to watch it. For all the people on online, you can also watch the song while we are all watching it somewhere collectively. Expectations that you have to promote the film on your own and make sure that many people land up at the theaters. Ravi was asking a question about the lyrics, and he was asking that, when you write the lyrics, especially for this song, you wrote the lyrics yourself. And other songs in the film are also really like very poignant and poignantly placed in the film. So, like, when you're writing the lyrics for a song and you're writing the script, they are quite different, the process, because they also stand alone independent of the film, and they also find its way within the narrative. So are the two processes of writing lyrics and script screenplay different?
Yes, lyrics and screenplay techniques are really different. But when I was writing this film, this song was not there. There was just a small bit where this girl dances. But then I wanted to write. Then when I was shooting this film, this song came up, and then I asked my producer, I want to really record this, and I composed it. And because I composed it, now I also wanted to dance. So then I got that done. Yeah.
You got that done. That's amazing. And what about the other songs? Did you how,
No, the other song is written by Mr. Kiran Kaverappa, one of the lyricists from Kannada industry, and he's a very beautiful writer. It's very beautiful song that we are going to be releasing shortly. Yeah.
yeah. And those songs were chosen because you needed something in the screenplay, like you wanted to have
Yes.
a song to come in, and then you. How was that
Yes.
process?
It was my conscious choice to bring in Indianized narrative, and in only Indian narrative we have songs and an interval. So, because I relate to Indian content like that, like when I saw films, like when I fall in love, I imagine that that girl, like that person is, that person is like coming on a song, like there's a BGM and all these things. So that kind of narrative really works, I think,
Yeah.
so because our culture, we have been used to such kind of film culture. And so, yeah, that's why I brought in two songs. Yeah.
Okay, I think now I'll open it up before my last question because it's kind of somehow answered. I think it's open now for questions from both the audiences who are online, as well as uh, a very nice little gathering that has yeah, made their way through these rains. So yeah, any questions for Shailaja? People online, you could either just chat your questions or ask it off directly. Hi guys.
Yes.
No, no, this is already. I'll just repeat it. Go ahead.
Yeah, how did you like? Did you go to the producer and like scripted this? How was the approach from his side?
The question is, just for the benefit of the online audience, I'm going to repeat it. Is that how did the producer and how did you approach?
How did I find the
Producer, yeah,
producer?
finance.
Yeah,
So,
how did you finance your film, and did you do it?
yeah. So I actually wrote the film first, and I was looking for producers, and of course I didn't get. And so, and then when it so happened that one of a mutual friend of the producer that I met, Harini Dadala, she recommended that there is a person who actually boldly produces queer content, and they had also produced just the other love story. And that's when I contacted Harini, and then she also had taken a look at my previous film, and her vision was pretty similar to mine, and that's how she had the guts to shell out money for something so sensitive. So yeah, that's how. Yeah.
Exactly. So my question is twofold. Uh, Movies, films, basically earlier we said that they affect us. You said that you used to fantasize yourself as the hero, etc. But also, our anxieties are also reflected, mirrored in the films most of the times. And it's being about your own lived experiences. I wonder, like, I mean, and it's fictional necessarily, it's not completely autobiographical. So, your anxieties, whatever you've been facing as a queer person, as a lesbian, as in a real
Yes.
woman that you
Yes.
said
Queer
earlier.
woman.
How are they reflected? And then the second fold is we also talked about intersectionality, etc., caste, class. But apart from the intersectionality, also the sexuality itself can be heteronormative, as you said earlier. That the culture itself
Cis culture.
frames the being queer. So, like being polyamorous or being incestuous or being whatever, like sex worker, that also within the queer circle also is discriminated again. So, like when we watch the US films, especially gay films, they're like, they find the one at the end and live happily ever after, even the queer people. So, like, how do you tackle that, and how are your anxieties involved?
Yeah, that's a spoiler alert question, but anyways, yeah, but yeah. So basically, very simply putting it, I tried to bring it to life is larger than love. Yeah. So there, yeah, anxieties in the sense, these are a series of anxieties and evolution the character has had with different aspects, not just sexuality, and with many other aspects also. Yeah. So if you could repeat your question again.
Uh, how does the
Yeah.
okay. So your anxieties being mirrored into the film,
Mm.
has it happened
Huh.
that trying to make it also mainstream for the mainstream audience, we kind of tend to compromise at times about, as I said, being promiscuous, being polyamorous, or anything that is considered being into kink and BDSM, for example, gets extremely discriminated or tabooed within the queer society. So I'm asking, how is that aspect of intersectionality, sexuality and intersectionality within sexuality? Like, what is good lesbian? Like within the Indian culture, have you shown that, or have you like how have you tackled that issue?
No, she's not a good lesbian. She's a very bad girl.
Like ideal Indian lesbian, no, whatever. Adarsh Bharatiya Nari says Adarsh Bharatiya lesbian.
Yeah. No, Anita's character is not about being an Indian lesbian,
Yeah.
but it is about being a woman amid any sort of rigidity,
Yeah.
And it so happens that it is in India,
Yeah.
in South
Because
India.
like earlier when you said like I'm a biological woman and proud of it, I could interpret it as thankfully I'm better than trans women.
No, the wrong interpretation.
Yeah. I mean, of course, but then there is a scope for that loophole. That's
No,
all.
it's not like I am proud of being a biological woman, so that trans community doesn't have to be proud. It's just about for all the women to be proud of yourself. That's all, including the trans women.
Yeah. I mean, of course.
Yeah. And yes, and I am a biological woman, I said, because we are stuck with this feminine masculine, no? So I wanted to bring feminine to much more scientific way of understanding, but it so happens it becomes political. It depends
It
on
becomes really political. As in,
political. I
like,
can
what
see.
I have female reproductive system, or I have XX, or I have more estrogen. What exactly I have that is.
No, see, we have been for thousands of years been told that your body is female, be ashamed, be ashamed, be ashamed.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's only about that, in regard to that, when I say that I am a biological woman and I am proud of my body. It does not mean that anybody who's not a biological woman does not need to be proud of their body.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
wrong interpretation.
I mean, I knew, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to make it clear.
Good. Now you are.
Yeah, sure.
So in India we have like directors like no. So my question is like in India we have directors like Paranjit in Tamil Nadu or Nagaraj Manjule in Maharashtra, and they have been taking up issues of caste. Like most of their movies are around this discourse of caste, and if you see the even the how caste has been shown in films, like for example, like taking example of movie of like Jabbar Patel's Ambedkar movie was very different movie, and then how the narrate like the style of bringing caste has changed. And earlier you said that you are not looking at commercial success or commercial this thing, but these directors have been commercially hit as well. So I mean
Nagaraj Manjule.
Nagaraj Manjule and Paranjit as well. I mean, so what do you think? I mean, what do they have?
Stars. Stars. They have
No,
stars.
but I mean, if, for example, Sairat movie, there were no stars.
Huh.
So I mean, so what do they have that makes them successful? And what do you think? Like you, like for you, it's a challenge because
Now you should understand, Sairat is a successful movie, but we don't know if the director is successful.
yeah, I mean, he's like quite a big face now in Marathi industry.
You
at
should
least,
understand the box office collection. A director gets to understand what is success. Otherwise, you should need to tell me what is success you're
No,
talking about.
since we are we've been talking about like commercial, because when we talk about commercial, it comes with money comes into, right?
See, now
And
for example, Paranjit is a statement. His films are a statement. And when before he could become a star, he had to make films with star. Now he can bring a non-star and Paranjit's production will stand out. But I don't think many of the directors who also make such kind of films have been able to reach there. Films have been successful, but the director has to have that this thing where a star has to come, an investor has to put that much, and it is about the box office collection.
right.
So that way, Sairat made the box office. We don't know if the director actually makes the box office, but
What-
go
what
ahead.
I meant exactly, like when we say sorry, I forgot. uh,
No, you were saying about what?
yeah, so I mean, both these directors, for example, they had a social capital. You know social capital, in the sense, like they knew that there is a like there is a support of community, because community will come, will watch, celebrate that movie. Because you as a queer person, I mean, it's been a struggle, for like for everyone in, like in society. There are different identities. So I'm just looking at, like probably your movie could be that milestone, to bring the social capital in such movies, because we need to have such movies which are not commercially watched or in a theaters or something. So I mean, what is that, you as a as a person, or we as a community need to bring to to this film industry, where such films are also get as success as like when many people watch. I mean to say, not success in the term was money. Yeah.
I think, yeah, that we are, the technology is taking us anyway because of the OTTs and digitization of arts. So I think we will be having more chance platform to bring in such sensitive subjects and non-star based content more. And yeah, the whole idea of success is changing right now with the technology, I think. Yeah.
off. Huh. Okay, so I don't know. This is a different argument. For the first time, I'm hearing from
Yeah.
you saying OTT platforms takes it to a larger audience.
Yeah.
But in some sense, don't you think OTT platforms makes it less accessible to an audience that does not, you know, have access to that kind of technology or subscriptions to these OTT platforms? So in that sense, does it go to the masses or?
Yeah, but yes, that is a pretty good this thing. But the OTT is like, for example, now think about 2010 when WhatsApp came. Now we can't live without it. Yeah, it's there in every village, so that's where it will go. Because see, now it's not just the Amazon or Netflix. There are lots of regional OTT content, and if we see that there is a regional OTT content with no other language, it means they have audience and that much of content. There is so much of viewership. So the viewership is increasing. It is accessible. Apps are there. Everything is technology is going forward. So I think right now it is not as successful as theaters, but after Corona, I think we have realized that theaters can be next to useless in the future. Yes, yeah.
I do believe that, especially with Shailaja's film, it also becomes a responsibility for all of us to start organizing screenings, right? And in our college campuses, in the collectives, wherever we work, to make sure that these narratives also have a different flow outside of the OTT and these theater spaces, because the kind of community groups or the people we may interact with may not actually be able to afford even a film ticket, or it may have a very small phone, not a smartphone. But I think that's our responsibility. The filmmakers made the film, and if you like it and you stand by it, you make you distribute it. You're a distributor as much as the filmmaker is. At least that's what I believe in. Yeah. Yeah, Arvind? No, think
Hi. I was wondering because you were also talking about how most of your crew were women and all that. I was just thinking about the making of the film. Um, Usually, I mean, like, because it's not just like four people, it's usually a larger crew, especially considering it's a feature film and all that. Um, and usually, in the making of these processes, in the making of the films, uh, it's an impersonal sort of setting where it's a story, it has to be made. There is a the idea of being professional with it, like, screenplay is like this, whatever is written, what is going to come off, and we are just going to do it, whatever. And also in that, alongside, there is also what I have seen is that it's quite gendered. The way the film is made itself, like how you're positioning, how you're blocking everything, how you're getting locations, everything. So I was just wondering, considering it's quite a personal film, how was that negotiation happening, and where was there any negotiation? Because was there difficulty also in communicating the film to the crew in itself, rather than, I mean, like, because that itself becomes a big task, right? And was it an impersonal or personal, or if they became involved in the making of the process, how did that change? Or yeah, that.
It all changed because of friendship we built, the whole crew through it. Because initially there were problem because the entire crew, I was the only queer person in the crew, and so I was this. There is an exotic view about me, so we need to say that I'm also human. So it came about through friendship, through days, and yeah. So yeah, did I answer your question? Okay. That is
A nice way of looking.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess for the people online, if there are any questions that you may want to ask Shailaja, then you could just tell us. And okay, saying
In theaters, probably.
okay, yeah, yep,
Diverse.
yep.
Soon in probably by early Jan. in multiplexes. Yeah.
Guys, I'm quite excited. 'Cause I didn't expect. I thought it was a documentary. That's what I did. But then now it's a feature film, and I'm surprised. I really liked your trailer. It was
Thank you.
very catchy, and the song.
Thank you.
It's very catchy,
Thank
actually.
you so much.
Yeah, because I didn't expect a feature film, and then I'm like all excited. Yeah, no.
Thank you.
It's done. It's done. Unless there's some kind of weird pirate copy that you find somewhere, which is chanceless. But yeah. I mean, it's also really interesting, even though we've covered quite a lot of themes. I think, like in old Kannada films, the way we saw Bangalore, uh, it still evokes this kind of nostalgia, especially in Bangaloreans, which I think is a typical thing that many of my colleagues who are not from Bangalore always been like, there's something about Bangalore and nostalgia. Because I think some part of us also feels like we've lost some old Bangalore, this 80s that we would see in cinema. But I feel after watching a film, I felt like parts of me was already feeling nostalgia about what was also there, because now things have shifted. So I think the film is also about the city in that sense, and it's really like really lovely to go through those alleys and knowing that have you've been there before and stuff like that. So what was your experience like shooting in the city of Bangalore? Like, was it like, do you have to take permissions, because most of it is also in Cubbon Park, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
So yeah, we took the necessary permissions, and because it was a it is a film about that actually also reveals the economical strain these queer people are going through. They are not definitely going to go hang out in malls and pubs. So of course they will go to the
public
cheapest,
spaces.
to the most reasonable places to find love, and that is the Bangalore, which was in 80s. So Kabban Park, Lal Bagh, Nandi Hills. So yeah. Yes.
Make out
Yes.
whatever you can. Oh, there's a new
Thanks to,
campus.
oh yes, yes. Thanks to Bhavani sir, actually. It was great help from Bhavani sir. Yeah.
Yeah, mine, I think it's kind of generic. A is that also I think you kind of touched upon it, but how important do you think it is to kind of reflect the times, political and yeah, like that in as an artist through your artwork? Is it something that you do consciously, or is it just comes to you because we are political beings,
No, I now it doesn't come consciously, and it never came consciously. But initially, like for example, Jane Goodall says that she started as a scientist, but when she learned the truth, she couldn't help but be an activist. So I think every form of anything, once you understand the truth, I think your work will become political. Yeah.
and also kind of a continuation, like your film is a queer film, so I mean it's obviously it's apparent. So as I don't know, it's something that maybe I've noticed in at least the arts. If you're a queer person or a person from any kind of marginalized identity, uh, you're kind of expected to make films that are about that or make work about that. So I have sometimes met people who get a little irritated of they want to make something other than that. Why do I have to constantly talk about my identity politics or maybe something more frivolous and
I don't know. I think, like Frida says,
yeah.
the best thing I know about that I paint about is myself, because I'm the best thing I know about, and I'm the best thing that amuses me. And I'm sad about people who are not amused by themselves.
It's a nice way of looking at it.
But on the contrary, I watched a really beautiful film. It's called Days. It's film by Simon Lian. It's Chinese. Makes very slow cinema. And it was really odd that he won the award for the best film in Berlinale, I think, 2 years before. I didn't read it as a queer film. Oh, damn it. Okay, I'll repeat the thing. I was saying, on the contrary, I was just saying that, I think, yeah, oh, yeah, because it's like really my debate point, right? Like, so I happened to watch this film by this my favorite director Simon Liang, who made this film called Days, and it was screened at the Berlinale, and of course it won the award for best queer film in the festival. And it really disturbed me because I didn't read it as a queer film, first of all. And every time you see any kind of a homosexual relationship, I don't think it is, the film was not at all for me. I mean, I also know about homosexuality and how people are fighting hetero, but I feel like he's on some other journey. He was trying to talk about something totally different. And sometimes I feel the way festivals categorize certain kinds of film limits the way we look at the film as well. And I think the same thing happened even when I was watching Nanu Ladies. Of course, it's made by a queer artist. It's about, but I don't think the film is only about queerness in that sense, or about a certain kind of a. So for me, it was, that's why my questions are really about the intergenerational questions, because a filmmaker is sensitive to every generation and the aspiration in every generation, right from her grandmother to her father to the partner to the mother, sister. There's so many things, right? And even though love is one space where we can find these certain kinds of expressions coming out, there's many other kinds of expressions coming out with other relations. So it's not exclusive, like, right now I'm in love and I'm only queer, therefore this is the only part of my life. It's in connection with many, many, many other relations. And I think that's why the film is so powerful, because it doesn't stop at um, just about only exploring that thread. So I think that even we have to start becoming a little bit more open. Even if the filmmaker might choose to say, I'm a queer filmmaker, sure, but I mean, the queer filmmaker can also speak about, labor, or like, I don't know, religion, I don't know, other things. So I think it's also because now at the times that we are, it's like making us see everything in these boxes, because this identity politics thing has made us look at.
this film becomes this film becomes like it's not just a queer film, but it largely becomes a queer film because we are largely living in a cis society. If we don't live in that society, it's just another film. Yeah, sometime. Statistically queer, you could say.
But you're actually lucky because your film is very unique. I think it's probably the first queer feature film.
In Kannada, maybe not queer first. Maybe it is the first lesbian love story, but the queer film Nanu Avanalla Avalu has come. That came in a theater release. Yeah,
So it's the second. Still unique.
yeah.
Nice.
There are quite some films about sexuality in Kannada
In
actually.
Kannada, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, why does the numbers matter? Because
It's unique. There's more than.
It's just that to show the evolution, the pace of evolution of our thinking culturally. So I think that it's important. Like not about first or second, but that this is coming out. These things are coming out in within this cultural language. Yeah.
So what do you think about it, like challenge of this movie getting mainstream? Any sense, like, for people, for many people, it's like
Hmm.
something we don't talk about,
Hmm.
and so I mean, you might do everything,
Hmm.
permissions and everything, and then finally, finally the release, something happens. I hope that doesn't happen, but then what? I mean, because such movies, I mean, we in past also we have seen
Then
this.
put it in the OTT. That's it.
But again, going on OTT, there are like so many things. I mean, of course,
Come to Mara. I'm kidding.
so that movie had to come on OTT itself. Of course, I mean it was a Netflix series, but then such, I mean, this release in theaters, it's going to be really interesting.
So yeah, it depends on each. I think state government, like how it is acting towards that. So I think the challenge, like is more about keeping that movie sustained in the theaters than getting a release, and getting people to watch also. So yes, there are a lot of possibilities that a film might not, a film which is made might see a theater, might not see a theater, but I think the we should just make the film, and it's not just about now. Yeah.
So, guys, any more questions? I wish we could see one or two things also more, but that's all we have from the film right now. And Shailata.
Was one as Mara's documentary. Seriously, that's what I found.
I mean, the thing is, we don't. So that's the thing. At Mara, we also screen documentary films and fiction films that we love. Stuff that's already on OTT, we'll still screen it. I mean, for us, it's just a thought process that's guiding our work at this point in time, and we'll just screen it as per that. Yeah.
Since I had the privilege of watching the film, which is that like just all your work actually, not just Nanu Ladies. It seems like you put your body at the center of it, and your body is kind of the site of your experimentation, your political assertion, like all the work that you do. And a couple of years ago in Mara, we started a small theater process where actually Anish, who's in the film, he also taught us. So one of the first things he told us when we started that process was that you have to put your body at the center of whatever it is that you're doing. And it took me a really long time to understand what that really means. I think I'm still discovering that. But I guess like what I wanted to ask was that because in that process we were working with people from very different caste and class groups. So the question becomes which body, whose body, and like how do those bodies interact? Because there is the social difference and the difference in social positions, and then there is also the, I guess, the materiality of your body and how it is. So I just wonder, like, do you feel that the body can be a passage that can also transcend social differences, like that we can find some kind of commonality when you put the body at the center? Or do you feel like the body is always shaped or conditioned by where it comes from, by who it is, by how it chooses to express? Like, what is that line between an individual body and a collective body?
Uh, uh, so yeah, um, yes, I did put my body as the center. I do put my body as the center of all the forms of artwork I work with, and because my body reflects what the collective is, and the collective reflects what I am. Yeah. So yeah. So your question was collective body and individual body.
Like whether what is that line between the body being a space of individual freedom, individual assertion? Like you spoke a lot about how when we were having the conversation about
Hmm.
the selfish gene,
Huh.
that part of the conversation, you spoke a lot about the fact that the body is also how a space for asserting individual freedom and individual kind of struggle. At the same time, I guess the body is also collectively conditioned or expressed. So, what is that line? Like, how do you figure out that line between individual body, collective body? Is there a difference, or is it just the same, or how do you kind of approach that in your practice?
It's so philosophical. um, I think I would rather put it saying, "This is my body, and I know about it better than anyone else." And I would like to present it because I think it's great. And through my body, I try to explore most of it and understand most of it, because this is the first-hand experience I have through my body. So I also think that this body is rather a very rational thing of, it's a culmination of five senses. And it's actually it's it's a variation of experience. Those are bodies, like with minds. So that way, I think, yeah, my I make my body the canvas, and I always put it in the center of my art. So because this is how I understand the best and I can convey the best. So yes, my body can be a tool, if that was your question.
No, but also, I mean, if we're talking about body, it's also a socio-political thing, right,
Correct.
in that context. So, in that sense of which body, who is this who is putting themselves at the center of that body? So, if this is a person who hasn't historically had the space or the freedom to kind of express, and they're taking up space because they have to, as opposed to like a body. I mean, if we're taking concrete example of a straight cis male or an upper caste person who has had the like history of being able to keep their body front and center always. Now, is there, if this artist or whoever is again putting their body, it's a continuation of that same oppression of whatever it is, right? So,
No, I didn't understand. I didn't understand. Please repeat your question. I would like to know.
so I'm saying, no. Maybe second time I can be more articulate.
It's an extension of an oppression to put someone's body at
As
the
in-
center and say, follow this.
No, I'm saying even if the socio-political background of that body matters is what I'm saying. Yeah, like the example of if this was a filmmaker who was an upper caste straight male, and they are again putting themselves at the center and taking up all the attention. They have historically already taken up all the attention. So that is different as opposed to a person who is kind of trying to reclaim their space.
Correct.
So I'm saying there is a difference. We can't just talk about a body as a unified being. Saying that, yeah. I don't know how else I can explain.
I think, like, well, I mean, just to continue and also her question or reflection, it's just also. I guess something that we were struggling with when we were trying to work is whether, on the one hand, of course, certain bodies have certain authentic experiences and they have those stories to tell, which is what you were talking about earlier as well. But is that story, can only that body tell that story? Or is it okay, not okay, but is it also like in terms of your own practice and process? So just to take her example forward, like if there was a heterosexual man who wanted to make exactly the same film, but obviously will not be able to make exactly the same film, but of course did treat the matter sensitively, but from his location as a heterosexual man. Nowadays, I feel like a lot of the conversation about representation is that only if you are ABCD, you can tell this story because you are that body, right? So basically, basically your thoughts on that.
Okay, yes, that is very important because there is a person who is queer will be able to understand these things better, and the person who is heteronormative and wants to talk about queer issues without coming out of their heteronormative boundaries. That is happening, no, all over the world right now in the political scenario. That is why it is just that culture is being so enthrust over and over again, so I think now that yes, it's not that a heteronormative person cannot tell us a queer story unless and until they can accept that there is queerness inside them. Yeah.
This can be another conversation actually, because I have like a lot of questions now. But yeah, I think if anybody else has any other questions, because we've been speaking now for an hour and a half, I just had one question about your utopia, like the future vision, like of this model of demonstrating within the film, especially like using, working with women technicians, allowing for autonomy with of choices like individual choice, freedom of expression, um, just the body floating across this public space without fear. Um, and how do we continue, or what do you see as the vision in this current political climate and in the market? Like, do you think it's going to open up more?
Yes,
Yes.
of course.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
because technology, we are inevitable to evolve towards how technology is going. So I think yes, it is going to change. More women will come into this field, and there is going to be a large shift, definitely. And what I envision is what they should, I think, uh, what I envision or aspire is a society where resources are equally shared and they are largely in the administration of women. Yeah. Because see, all species, the society is female and her children. The males live outside the society. Right now, even we don't understand how, like we don't even realize how much the man has weaved himself through a role of a father, which is absolutely unnecessary. There is no father in nature, as difficult as it is to hear. Yeah, so I think I strongly envision a society where women can be free and they have financial freedom first and foremost, and they can just be individuals than to be told as a proud woman or a diminished woman. They are first individuals. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite a utopic vision. Yeah, I think that's a really nice note to kind of close this conversation on. However, I guess we'll know more about Shailaja's films online. She has a Facebook page, of course, with all the different media channels opening up. You can follow it, and for sure, we'll also host a screening when the film, when we are allowed to. Uh, but yeah, thank you very, very much. And maybe
Thank
you
you
want to
so
have a
much.
last word to all your audiences, what they need to watch out for.
Watch out for the film is great. Please watch it. Even if it's not great, please try to understand there are some elements that the film is trying to get at with reproductive sciences and reproductive rights. So it is not just about queerness. So yeah, please watch the film and please give your honest comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.